So today's endangered species video is on sawfish, a really cool and unique fish species. So before we get started, what is a sawfish? What group of animal do you think the sawfish belongs to? Do you think it's a shark or do you think it's a ray? I'll let you have a look at the sawfish again. And you can guess. I'll give you a couple seconds to take your guess and then we'll see. It's actually a ray. And I know it kind of looks like a shark because of this dorsal fin up here and these two side fins. But when we look at the bottom of the fish, we can see that it's flat and it has the mouth at the bottom and the head goes into the fins. So even though it looks like a shark and many people confuse it as a shark, it's actually a ray. So obviously the most unique thing about the sawfish is their namesake, the saw. Um, it's actually called a rostrum, and these points on the saw are actually specialized scales called denticiles. And they grow throughout the sawfish's entire life. So even if one gets knocked off or it gets worn down, they'll still grow out. And a sawfish can live up to 30 years, so they're pretty old once they get to full size. But why in the world does a sawfish have a saw at the end of the nose? What could a fish possibly use a saw for? Well, actually, they use it for hunting and protection. So protection when they're young, sharks or even dolphins might try to prey upon them, and then you can use it as a little bit of a weapon to try to deter predation. But they hunt like this in this GIF, you'll see. They wave their saw back and forth through the water, and they try to stun any prey that might be in there. Pretty cool. And their prey mainly consists of crabs and shrimp and other crustaceans and small fish. So unless you're one of those two things, you don't have to worry about a sawfish waving its saw in your face or waving your saw on your legs. So unless it's disturbed. Another really cool thing about the sawfish's saw, besides that it looks awesome, is that it has sensory organs that can detect electricity on the saw. So even if it's dark or it's murky, the sawfish can sense through electricity if there's fish around them or other living things, and then they'll wave their saw back and forth and prey upon whatever's in that area. So that's really cool. And as you can see from this graphic as well, sawfish can get up to 7 meters. That's really long. In feet, they can get up to around 23, 24 feet. And that's even hard to comprehend, right? So to help you comprehend, I have this picture here. You know Shaquille O'Neal, the basketball player, he's a pretty tall dude. So a sawfish at maximum size is equal to 3.5 shacks stacked on top of each other. So pretty big animals. But even though they are really giant and great at hunting, they're actually critically endangered. There's 5 species of sawfish. So there's not just one species, but all of the species are critically endangered. And that means that they're really close to becoming extinct in the wild. So it's a really concern, the populations right now. The sawtooth or the small-toothed sawfish is the sawfish that lives off the coasts of the United States. It's the only species that's off the coast of the United States. And its main population center is right down here in South Florida off of Everglades National Park. And there's only actually about 500 small-toothed sawfish left in the entire world. So their population is pretty small. But why are they endangered? One of the main reasons are overfishing, debris entanglement, and habitat loss. And the fact that sawfish are really slow growing and they can't reproduce until they're 10 years old, it makes it really hard for sawfish populations to recover. So if their population is brought down to the small size, it's going to take many years for them to completely recover. So overfishing. Back in the 1800s and early 1900s, sawfish were like a prized commodity for fishermen. One, because they look pretty cool and they give a great fight, but they were almost fished to extinction. In fact, people did actually think they were extinct in the mid 1900s. But they were prized because you could cut off their saw and keep it as a trophy, or you could sell the fins as shark fin soup, even though they're not actually sharks. So there's a lot of fishing pressure back then. And there's some fishing pressure even today, because obviously they're cool animals and they're still valued on the black market. But that's one of the main reasons the populations declined so much. Another threat that faces sawfish is debris and entanglement. So you see the really cool points on their saw. It's great for trapping fish, but it also traps the sawfish itself too. Because could you imagine trying to untangle this from around this saw? And sawfish don't have thumbs. They can try to untangle this. So once a sawfish gets tangled in something, it's pretty much stuck there for a long time. And that can be a real problem with like old fishing nets that get discarded and thrown into the ocean. They can trap the sawfish, or fishing line, or plastic bags, or a lot of other different trash items. If they get left in the ocean, they can entangle a sawfish. And that's a really big threat right now with their populations being so low, because any sawfish that dies is a big deal. And finally, another huge threat to sawfish is habitat loss. So sawfish live in mangrove estuaries, but their native natural lands have been converted a lot into like development and settlements. So they're losing a lot of their original habitat. And in addition to development, climate change is impacting their natural habitat as well. So those are a couple of things that are threatening the sawfish. But what can be done to save them? A couple of things. Like I said, their habitat loss is a big deal. So the number one thing that we can do to combat that is conservation. I said earlier that their main population was off of Everglades National Park. And as you can see in this picture right here, it's because it's all conserved land. So they have a pristine habitat here. And over here is the Dry Tortugas National Park. And there's a couple wildlife refuges that have habitat that the sawfish can live in. So what we can do is we can create more conserved lands and maybe like replant areas that have been developed with mangroves. And if you don't know what mangroves are, there's these really cool plants that have roots that go down into the water, and they can tolerate salt water, but they create great habitat for small fish. And these small fish make great prey for the sawfish. So restoring habitat in certain areas and conserving land is a great way to make habitat suitable for the sawfish. Another thing we can do is to help control debris. So there's less things for the sawfish to get tangled in. So you can do this. People do this by doing beach cleanups and limiting the amount of plastic they produce, like plastic bags. And another thing people do is really promote recycling your fishing line so it doesn't end up in the ocean. So this is what this is for. This is a tube next to the water of maybe a popular fishing spot. And people can just stick their used line in there so it doesn't end up in the water for a sawfish to get tangled in. And finally, protection. So sawfish became the first marine fish to be classified as an endangered species by the US government. It happened in 2003, and because of that, you cannot target sawfish while you're fishing, and you cannot capture and kill sawfish. So they're protected, and the punishment for killing a sawfish is up to a year in prison and $50,000 in fines. So it's really discouraged from killing a sawfish. And finally, we want to know more about sawfish so we can better protect them. And we can do this by a couple different ways. Satellite tagging, it helps us understand where the sawfish go, where they reproduce, and where their young grow up. And if we know that kind of information, then we can better, preserve those areas and restore those areas. And I included a video at the end that has a video on how scientists capture and tag these sawfish. Another tool that scientists use is genetic analysis, and they can use DNA in sawfish to help estimate populations, which is really cool new technology. And that's all I have for you today. I got all my information from the Florida Fish and Wildlife, NOAA, and Save Our Seas Foundation, and they have a lot more cool information if you want to learn more about sawfish. And those were sent out with the link. And like I said, with those is a YouTube video that you might want to check out. Thanks for stopping by.